found that they could make more money by distilling corn rather than just selling it as grain. But that was certainly not unique to the Melungeons. And these groups usually did not identify themselves by these colloquial names. They were called that by outsiders. These names were nearly always considered insulting, a pejorative term, and in some places today you can still get a fight started by calling somebody a Melungeon or one of these other names. There are many theories about the origin of the Melungeons. And later on today, we're going to be hearing about some of the facts that we have uncovered over the years about where the Melungeons came from. But of course, a good legend always makes a good story, and a lot of what was written about the Melungeons, particularly in the 19th and early 20th century, was written by newspaper and magazine writers, and it seemed like every writer had to come up with a new theory just to make the story interesting. So you get stories that the Melungeons were descended from deserters or stragglers from the DeSoto expeditions, or that they were one of the lost tribes of Israel, or remnants of the lost colony of Roanoke Island, or Welsh Indians, or any number of different theories were popularized over the years. Most whites did not really believe those stories. They tended to believe that the Melungeons were the descendants of runaway slaves, renegade Indians, and, as they called them, poor white trash. The Melungeons themselves usually claimed Indian and or Portuguese ancestry, and we'll talk about those claims a little bit later in today's presentations. The first recorded use of the term Melungeon came in 1813. The earliest reference that we see to the word Melungeon came from the minutes of the Stony Creek Primitive Baptist Church in Scott County, Virginia. And there wasn't any explanation that went along with that. It was a comment that one member of the church was criticizing another member of the church for, quote, harboring them Melungeons. But there was no explanation of who these Melungeons were or what was meant by that term. At about that same time, we see land records and tax records indicating that these families were moving into the area, into this area, which Hawkins County at that time was much bigger. Hancock County was formed in the mid-1840s, and that seemed to be sort of the center of Melungeon settlement. There were stories that the Melungeons were here when the first white settlers came, but when you look at the records, you find that these families were moving into this area at about the same time as the white settlers. They were migrating just as their neighbors did. There's evidence that many of these groups came from Virginia and from North Carolina. Jack Goins will be talking about the migration of the Melungeons a little later on today. There's also evidence that another group came up from South Carolina. Kathy James will be talking about that a little later today. As I said, census and other records indicate a variety of classifications. Some were classified as Indians. Free person of color was one that was used. Mulatto was another term that was used, and sometimes you would find the same family listed in different categories every 10 years. Every census, it seemed to be that how we were classified was really up to the person doing the census. In those days, of course, being a census taker did not involve being an anthropologist or a sociologist. It just meant you could read and write. And so the census takers would take a look at our ancestors and mark them down as whatever they happen to think they might be. These classifications continued in early Tennessee records, and one of the interesting things is that when Tennessee was first formed, there was no restriction on voting for people of color. Any free male could vote. Of course, women weren't allowed to vote at that time. Indians were not allowed to vote. Slaves, of course, did not vote, but any free male was allowed to vote under the original Tennessee Constitution. That Constitution was changed, and in the mid-1840s, several Melungeons were put on trial for illegal voting, and they were several of them some of them were acquitted, and charges were dropped on the others. But it was a very intimidating kind of an experience. I think Jack Goins can testify to the fact that the records show that not many Melungeons tried voting until many years later because of what happened to these people in the mid-1840s. The fact that they were acquitted did not guarantee that anybody else was going to be, and of course going to court involves a great deal of expense, and there's also no guarantee that you're going to win. In many locations, Melungeon families did go to court to win a legal designation as Portuguese. That was one of the popular explanations of where our people came from. Its accuracy is one of the things that we're studying today. Many people felt that Portuguese was a euphemism that was used to kind of disguise or to obscure African ancestry, which was one of the things that would pretty much put you in a second-class citizenship category. So the Melungeons who were able to go to court and win the designation as Portuguese, that was considered a benefit to do that. And in one of the more famous cases concerning the origins of the Melungeons, in the 1870s, a young attorney by the name of Lewis Shepard defended the inheritance of a young woman of Melungeon ancestry, and came up with the theory that the Melungeons were the descendants of ancient Carthaginians and Phoenicians who migrated through Portugal to the United States. Now, his evidence for that is primarily, we believe that he used the information that was used in the earlier illegal voting trial, but of course a lot of imagination may have gone into that. It wouldn't be the first time that a lawyer used a bit of imagination to get to win a case, but it's very interesting that even the erroneous information sometimes gives us a great deal of information about who the Melungeons were. The Melungeons did become a legend over the years. In the Civil War years, of course, this part of Tennessee was primarily Union. This was an area that supported the Union, but we were in a state that went Confederate, and that made East Tennessee a very bitter and violent place for everyone, not just Melungeons, but when people talk about the Civil War, they talk about it metaphorically as brother against brother. Well, in East Tennessee, sometimes that was literally the case. People in the same families found themselves fighting in different armies. Many Melungeons found themselves drafted into the Confederate Army, and some of them deserted and joined the Union Army. Jack Goins has a relative who did just that, and was hanged for his troubles in the late part of the Civil War. After the war, there were tales of marauding Melungeons, people who came down out of the hills to prey on the helpless women and children whose menfolk were off fighting in the war. But again, that would seem to be a good bit of legend going into that. Of course, there were bushwhackers. There were all kinds of people who really had no loyalty to either army. They were They were out to plunder. There were others who had resentments that went on after the war, and there was violence that took place for quite some time after the Civil War because of the bitterness engendered during that time.